to Hit the Reset Button, the podcast where we explore purpose driven pivots and the courage it takes to start over, especially after 50. Today's guest, Mr. Ravneet Gill, spent more than 30 years in high stake finance, including roles as CEO of Deutsche Bank India and Yes Bank, and then chose a completely new path. He stepped away from corporate life to launch New Horizons Alliance, a bold venture in sports and education. In this episode, Ravneet shares what led to this pivot and the challenges of starting over after 50 and how purpose reshapes ambition. This is a candid conversation about reinvention and why it's never too late to write a new story and the unexpected joys of beginning again. Let's dive into Ravneet's remarkable second chapter. Good morning, Ravneet. Thank you for joining me today.
Morning, Malu. Pleasure as always.
Thank you. So I'm going to start at the very beginning. You had a long and a very successful career in the financial sector. What made you decide that it was time to move on?
I think even though I spent 3.5 decades in financial services, I think my deciding passion really was sport. And I always knew that at some point in time, I'd like to do something in sport and education, together. So that really was the driving force, Manu, in terms of, the pivot, if you can call it that. I also feel that, I've spent my entire life in this country. I got educated here. I started my career here, built my career here. And a lot of us who feel passionate about causes, feel committed to causes, restrict that commitment or that support philosophically. Is that, can we in our own small way also make a difference and contribute to the transformation that India currently is undergoing?
But the thing is, I think the question on most people's mind, especially with somebody like you who's been a banking legend, is that, it's not easy to take a completely new path, right? It's usually the tried and tested approach of board roles or, staying closer to the comfort zone. In your case, it's the financial sector. In your case, you decided to do a completely new path. So what was the rationale and how was it to move from one to another?
So the way I looked at it, you're right. So, when you, for instance, pivot to something completely new, there's always I won't say the fear, but the concern about the unknown, right? And, how does it pan out? So that's on the one side. The second side of it, Manu, really is that you also feel that as in when you, retire, let's say from financial services in my case, how, disconcerting is it to feel that you are beginning to think that your best days are behind you, but more importantly, the fact that the learning is behind you. And in a world that is changing so quickly, that is becoming young so quickly, you'll end up painting yourself into a corner. So I think more than the concern about the fear of the unknown or, how you will do in a completely untested field, I think should be the inspiration, the motivation and the drive to remain contemporary and to, have a very meaningful connection with the world. I mean, if you look at the whole digitalization process that the world is undergoing, we keep talking about AI, machine learning, the whole creator economy. The world is getting younger. For you to be able to relate to the world, have multiple touch points with the world, and feel that, you're living a full life, it's very important that you're able to relate to that. And the only way you'll relate to it is that if you eventually end up reshaping some of your perspectives, re-engineering your mindset, and in some ways rediscovering yourself. So I just feel that to my mind was a bigger driver than the concern around the unknown or that, been in financial services for 3.5 decades. Why don't I just continue there rather than try something new? So it was really a question of, I won't say that it was a second innings or anything of that kind, but I would say that it was in a very large measure also inspired by the fact that, how do you continue to remain relevant? How do you, have a more contemporary sensibility and remain very connected to the next generation, which I think for all of us is such a big driver.
I mean, you make it sound very easy, but being considered a leader or a legend in one space, how did you feel to leave that identity behind and build something new?
So I also felt that your identity is basically twofold as a professional. One is being part of the organizations that you represent. And the second is that you as an individual. And I always believe that one of the ways, one of the metrics that you can use in terms of determining that, how much have you grown, how much have you evolved, and, how much has the organization contributed to you, that tomorrow, if you were to step out into to the, to the big bad world outside, would you land on your feet? And would you be able to create a new path for yourself? That path doesn't have to be a career path. It is just, let's say, a path that leads you to finding new vistas, discovering new horizons, and in some ways realizing that there was so much within you, which for whatever reason hadn't found manifestation. Either it did not find expression in the job that you did or in the industry that you were in, but it was there within you, and got built up over a period of time, and came from the people that you met, the experiences that you had, the ups and downs that you went through. So I think it's also very exciting and challenging to be able to, confront yourself with all of that. So when you said that I make it sound easy, I don't think I make it sound easy. I think one of the things which makes it easier for all of us, in fact, is if we can simplify our thinking a little bit. And I think it was just a process of simplifying my thought process in terms of what the future held for me.
I know the passion that you have for sports. Pursuing a passion is one thing, but turning it into a viable venture, especially later in life, is a different challenge altogether. So in your case, was there someone or something that gave you the push to start over? Basically, you need that extra courage to go down the new path. So what was it for you?
I think first and foremost, I'm a very proud Indian. And the second thing is that, you talked about my love for sport. If you look at all the big, great nations in the world, without exception, each one of them is a sporting superpower. I think the only one which is an outlier is India, right? So if you see the medal tally at the end of the Olympics, it's like the descending order of the world GDPs. And then, you'll have India at 70, 71, right? Which I think is also a collective responsibility for each one of us to address. That's the reason we are not the sporting power that we ought to be. I had a slightly different view. I thought that, the quality of administration in Indian sport need to go up. We needed, world-class leaders of Indian sport who understood sports science and sport medicine and, sports law and sports sociology and the commercialization of sport. And unless that happened, Indian sport would not take the step change that was required. So I decided that, we must bring the world's best sports education. So there is something called AISTS, which is the International Academy of Sports Science and Technology, which IOC started. The International Olympic Committee started. They're based in Lausanne. They had never stepped out of Lausanne. And then the only country that they've come to is India. And feel incredibly proud that, we brought them to this country. And we said that, let's start building that foundation, although it will take time and, you won't see results overnight. But could you build a whole constituency of world-class leaders of Indian sport? And that was a very big driver, frankly. But it wasn't just a question of excellence in sport. I talked about India not being a sporting superpower. I think there was another element of it. Each one of us say that India is the youngest large nation, on the planet, which is a fact. I mean, more than 50% of our population is below 23 years of age. But equally, Malu, we are the stroke capital of the world, the diabetes capital of the world, the hypertension capital of the world, and cancer capital of the world, unfortunately, right? And some of these are really ailments, afflictions that are, driven by sedentary lifestyles. So it's not just sport for sporting excellence, it's also sport for building a healthier nation. So we keep talking about the demographic dividend. This can turn into a demographic curse if we don't have a very healthy, productive population as well. So the question also was that can we make sport part of the national discourse on public health? So it was both sport and health. And if you look at the two in conjunction, then do you think that you really need a purpose beyond that? You don't, right? So after that, my concerns, my anxieties about stepping into something, gets dwarfed by the enormity of what needs to get done there. And so we said that why don't we take this challenge up and try and see if we can make a go of it. And yeah, so that is what the driver was.
And in one of your earlier interviews, also you had mentioned that this was the need of the hour, which absolutely is spot on, I guess. So I think it's in the right place at the right time.
And I still remember that when I started off as an entrepreneur, people told me that Ravneet, you need to set aside 1,000 days for this before you start to get the feeling that you've got all your ducks lined up. And I don't know what's magical about the 1,000 days, but that's exactly the way it panned out. For the first 3 years, it was one step forward, two steps back. We were always recalibrating your business model, bringing in new elements, trying to see how you could, tweak others at the margin. But having done that, got your arms around that entire issue, I think we are now feel as a young entity that, we're beginning to achieve what we set out to.
While building your new venture, did you find yourself drawing on your experience as a banker, or did it feel more like stepping into shoes of a student again, learning, unlearning, and starting from scratch?
The latter. So, besides education, we looked at esports as well. And esports, by definition, I was spending a lot of my day with people who are in their early 20s. And one funny thing is they would sit in front of me and tell me how we should build a proposition. And I could intuitively tell that, what they were saying was wrong. But I would count till 10 and hold my breath and not say anything. And by the evening, realize that they were completely right. I was completely wrong. So their ability to think in terms of how to build IPs, how to monetize, harness IPs was off the charts. So a lot of the last 5 years has been that, that feeling about having been there and done that. You need to walk away from that. You really need to look at the world from a fresh pair of eyes if you really want to relate to it, if you want to embrace it, and if you want the world to embrace you, as a matter of fact. And today I feel that, I feel more in touch, more in tune with what's happening around me than I did, let's say, 20 years back. So I think when they say that, you should always act your energy rather than your age, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. So sometimes we feel that these are things which are nice to say, but, very difficult to implement. I think it's the other way around. I think they're much more tougher to buy into that concept rather than to have to live it. I mean, I can just tell you from, from personal experience and, everything that I've been exposed to in the last few years, that it's not that tough. It's not that tough. First and foremost, being an entrepreneur can be very liberating. And the second thing is, obviously, every problem is your problem. You also start off very small rather than having the big balance sheet of a bank behind you. But that part never really fazed me in terms of having to start from literally zero. Having said that, if I had to relive my life, I'd do it exactly the same way. I'd go and spend those 3.5 decades in banking, no question about that. Really enjoyed that part, loved that part. I would want to do it again if that opportunity arose. Having moved away from that, I mean, all I will say to people, who are at my stage of life, that sometimes a lot of concerns that we have or the magnitude of the challenge that we see before ourselves is a haze. Once you cut through that, there's a lot. It can be a very rewarding journey as well.
So once you moved into this, I know you don't like to call it a new chapter, but has this changed the way you think about leadership or think about success or think about the kind of legacy you want to leave behind? Because coming from a corporate to something completely different as an entrepreneur, there must be a shift in the way you look at these aspects. So what is your take on that?
So I think the way you thought as a professional, I mean, I think the one thing common between being an entrepreneur and being a professional is that there is a certain sense of responsibility towards you, right? And even when you were a professional, part of a large organization, you had a defined role. That organization had systems, processes, and all of that. And the fact that you were in a fiduciary, capacity, you had to be mindful of that. And be very, very responsible towards that. At the end of the day, banks and institutions of public trust. When you start off as an entrepreneur, and you still need to have that sense of responsibility for the few people who work with you, or the organization that you've seeded, and all the work that you're looking to do. Your career behind you in terms of my time in financial services gives you a certain level of access. It gives you a certain degree of credibility. It's important that you are able to build upon that rather than try and monetize that at this stage. When it comes to a legacy, I've never ever thought from that standpoint, Malu, and it's not very important for me. I just feel that every time generational shifts happen, you have to look ahead. You can't be thinking back. And even today, the way I measure myself on a day in day out basis is that, are we making a meaningful difference in however small a fashion to India's journey ahead as a healthier, more sporty nation?
Okay. We all know that a career by itself has a shelf life in most countries, given that there's a retirement age and some countries don't. Yet most of us never have a backup plan. Especially when you're asked to step out of your comfort zone after working for 25, 30 years, it hits you physically, mentally, and emotionally, right? So Why do you think it's so hard for senior professionals to hit the reset button even when they have got so much to offer?
I just think that we are a very cautious people and we are very conservative people. And to that extent, we tend to allow our thinking to get boxed. We also feel that, if there is a path that is the straight and narrow, which we have, walked on, all our careers, maybe that is what makes sense. So a lot of people ask me this question about the fact that, what a dramatic pivot from financial services into sport, right? I mean, that's as, 180 degrees as you can potentially get. Now the question really is that uh, ultimately it comes down to a sense of purpose. That do you have a sense of purpose that's strong enough to drive you out of that inertia or that comfort zone or whatever else it is? That's number one. Number two, I think it's very vital that each one of us has certain very deep rooted interests, passions outside of work. Uh, it could be social work, it could be conservation, it could be about climate, it could be about, you know, in my case, for instance, sport and education, it could be about technology, uh, and which is something that we should continue to water over a period of time. So that by the time you get to the end of your career, and frankly speaking, you should determine when your primary career ends, there is something that you can switch on. But if at 57, 58, 60, or whatever age, at that stage you start to plant the seeds, I think it becomes that much tougher. So I just feel that, having a deep passion, a deep rooted interest, I won't call it a hobby because that becomes a little whimsical, is so vital. Have a second string to your bow. It'll always give you a sense of comfort in terms of fallback options. But more importantly, it'll be able to engage your bandwidth in a more eclectic fashion. It's good to be totally consumed with your work and all of that. But frankly speaking, all of us have the ability to multitask, have the ability to be able to invest in things outside of work. It just then comes down to time management.
We still do not plan the way you're saying it. For example, if you look at birthdays, we know birthdays come on a specific day, Christmas comes on a specific day, but we're rushing on the last day to get gifts, right? So we're always rushing for the last minute rather than planning something. So passion is one. So if there's one advice that you want to give to somebody in the 50s and 60s who feels that there is more to life but not sure where to start, what would it be? Besides the passion that you mentioned, yes, that was one. But is there anything else that you would like to
Again,
add?
I said beyond passion, there has to be purpose as well. So, I mean, how do I define, passion, for instance, right?
Yes.
If you have an interest
Yeah.
which you cannot commercialize, then that's a hobby.
Yeah.
If you think that you have a deep interest which you and where you understand enough of that domain which you can commercialize, then call it a passion. Otherwise, we tend to use passion very loosely, right? So that I would say is number one. Second is that one of the things that happens with as we get along in life is that we get more set in our ways, and what's right, what's wrong, what is acceptable to us, what is not acceptable to us. That entire thing continues to narrow. So I would say that be receptive, be open, be flexible. And I think if you can consciously add those elements to your life, I think everything else becomes so much simpler, so much easier. So when we got into esports, for instance, 3 months before that, I did not know what esports was. Ours was not a gaming generation. We never gamed, right? So what was fantasy sport and what was real money gaming and what was esports? I had no understanding of that. 3 months later, we were running that as a business. And I think a lot of that came from help from people around who, understood that space so much better and more deeply. But I also thought that the journey and the transition became so much simpler because one went into it with a very open mind. And I think that is what made a big difference in my case. But I would say that, staying receptive, staying open minded, staying flexible is the most, I would say, foolproof recipe for contentment, for happiness.
Okay. Okay. If you were to look back over the last 5 years with your new venture, what's something that you've gained personally and professionally that you never expected?
I think first and foremost, getting deeper into so many domains which I was familiar with, but I can't say that, I understood those in their entirety. By virtue of getting into newer industries, newer sectors, it exposed me to so many new people. It literally flipped over my social network, my professional network. It also gave me the chance to work and interact very closely with a lot of younger people, which again refreshed my worldview and made me look at the world with a different lens, from a different lens. And to that extent, the level of how refreshed I feel, how energized I feel, how motivated I feel is has been terrific. I mean, every single morning I wake up bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, very excited at the prospect of what today holds. It had a set of challenges too when you run your own organization. Everything that needs to get fixed, everything that needs to get sorted, is your responsibility. You don't have a compliance department behind you, a legal department behind you, a finance function behind you, a risk management function around you. All those become your, responsibilities effectively, direct responsibilities at that, which again, you can see in one of two ways. Either you can allow it to overwhelm you, or then you just allow it to learn from it, and suddenly realize that your horizons have expanded immeasurably.
Tricky question. Who handles pressure better, bankers or athletes?
So I think the pressure that athletes face is
Yeah.
magnitude which bankers can never imagine. Right.
Okay.
I'll give you a very small recent example. Take somebody like Shubman. Right? He's the captain of India at 25 years of age. At 25, there's 1.45 billion Indians who are following him, expecting him to deliver every single time he goes there. Or there was Kohli before him, or Rohit Sharma, or Dhoni, or Neeraj Chopra, whoever else you look at. The entire nation is looking at you, expecting you to deliver every single time. That level of pressure, that level of preparation, that level of skill, you won't typically find in any other profession. So, yeah, I mean, working in a bank, the quarterly revenue pressures around compliance and regulation, managing people is a challenging role. But I would say that between the two, I think there is absolutely no comparison. But I'm glad that you asked this question, and I'd want to put something out there, Malu, for people to understand. There is something called the science of high performance. Okay. That high performance is not the literal English translation. It's a very precise, very sophisticated science. Now, in 35 years in banking, and even at senior levels, one never gets exposed to it. And when I got to this other side, got exposed to sport, suddenly it was everywhere. So effectively, the science of high performance is that you got your technicals in place, your skills are really good. How do they build mental resilience, mental strength of a magnitude that you can wake up every single morning, go there, and play like a champion? If you or I, for instance, on a particular day woke up not feeling too good, we could take the day off. But a professional sports person can't take a day off. So how do you show up as your best self every single day? And that's where the science of high performance really comes in. And one of the things that we did was that we brought in, the science of high performance, which is typically restricted to elite sport at a middle and high school level. I mean, think about young kids in India, the pressure that they are under, right? Societal pressure, peer pressure, parental pressure. So there are billions of kids and relatively limited opportunities. And then you see what happens, these kids in IITs, etc., who are preparing for these, very competitive exams. And we said that let's bring in this science of high performance and start building this, mental resilience, mental strength in these kids. And so that not only are they able to survive under pressure, but they're able to thrive under pressure. So that was another intervention that we brought, and that only came to me simply because of the exposure that I had to the world of sport. And it's so interesting that we see for ourselves in real life the difference that makes to young children in terms of their confidence, that they will put themselves out there, then how they go and deliver in interviews, in exams, etc. So I just think that the sense of responsibility that you feel towards the younger generation, the sense of responsibility you feel towards society, I think sport has given a whole new pathway for me to be able to do that, which potentially banking may not have done.
Okay. One last question. If your life had a new Netflix series right now, what would it be called?
What would it be called? Well, I mean, that's a really a good question, but uh, I guess it would be called no finish line. Uh, because, all these things, whether you look at it from the point of view of retirement, you talked about a shelf life, your ability to be able to go there and play sport, or, go there for a hike or a trek, or take up some adventure sport. I just feel that there should never be any finish line. And a lot of that comes down to mindset and our ability to be able to conquer our fears. So I would just say that no finish line, because every day, I see this in my new, journey, the ability to be able to learn new things, meet new people, meet high performers, people that you've held up in such high esteem and you literally hero worship. And all of that has now become part of my world. I mean, so I feel incredibly privileged. And I would just say this to, people who are in around the same zip code in terms of age, that there is so much out there which is yet to be explored, to be discovered, to be conquered. So embrace it rather than allowing it to, in some ways intimidate you, disconcert you. Embrace it. I mean, there's so much more to life, and life has so much more to give.
No finish line. It's such an inspirational phrase. So thank you so much, Ravneet. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And I guess we should do one in person soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Malu. First and foremost, thank you for having me on the podcast. And, also the fact that, you are on this journey. So wish you all the very best.